Hey, this is Carla.
This is Jasmine.
And you're listening to
Cracking the Coconut, where we tackle taboo conversations in the Filipino community.
By cracking one coconut at a time. Hey, what's up, everybody? I clearly did not get the singing genes. That's why you'll never find me doing karaoke at all.
It's very true.
But anyways, that's besides the point. We are on episode 14. We're back. I know it. You know it. It's been a real fucking long time since the last episode, really. It's just been, life has been insanely wild. It's been crazy. A lot of shit's gone down. Not like bad shit, but just like a lot of moving parts, a lot of changes.
Yeah, it's been a while, but we're back here cracking the coconut, giving you some good content, good conversations, and yeah, let's jump into it.
Let's jump around.
What is on her right now?
I don't know. It's the matcha, mango matcha latte.
Shout out to Binka Bites. We just got
Binka Bites in Millbrae. I think they have multiple locations in the San Francisco Bay Area. Honestly, side note, you guys should definitely check it out if you're in San Francisco Bay Area. They do bibinka, like bibinka bites, but they have a lot of fun different flavors like Nutella and coconut, ube, things like that. And they also have drinks. And this stuff, mango matcha latte with oat milk, 10 out of 10 would recommend. I took the first sip and it just felt like all my dreams are coming true. This is what dreams are made of. Hey now, hey now.
It's like all of a sudden you got a mic in your hands and you're singing away.
And I said I want to do karaoke. But this episode has a bunch of different topics, and it is because we've gotten a bunch of questions on TikTok, mainly comments that we're addressing on our TikTok. If you don't follow us, definitely follow us at Cracking the Coco. We post a lot of content there, not just clips of our podcast, but just other topics or content that has to do with topics happening within the Filipino community.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't been following our TikTok, the comment section, the discourse, it's popping. And this is kind of where we derived the topics for our podcast episode this time around. And we're just going to talk about in more depth with the responses and kind of let people know that, there's a lot more to talk about than a 50 character limit. I don't know how much TikTok limit is, but character limits don't end the conversation there. So here we go.
Okay, so the first comment, actually we've gotten multiple comments about this, but it's Filipinos in the Philippines basically saying that Filipino-Americans are not Filipino because they don't have Filipino values, but they only have American values. This is not a comment we've gotten once, but it's a few times, and I've not only seen it in our comment section, but in other Filipino creators' comment sections as well. It's something that's perpetual, it's ongoing, so we wanted to talk about it. What are these values that these Filipino in the Philippines talk about? So a value is the regard that something that is held to deserve, a person's principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. So we all value different things based on our lived experiences, based on nurture, how we were raised, the environment that we're surrounded by. What I value, Jasmine may not value, and what she values, I might think is a pile of dog shit. But yeah, so I just want to know what is a Filipino value? For example, my parents, they really value education. They want their children to go to school. My parents are educated. They pushed me to go to college and they pushed my sister to go to college. That is something that they hold at a very high regard. That is something that they truly value and think that is one of the most important things about just life in general, getting a good education. And not just high school, but higher education. So going to college and getting, at the very least, a bachelor's degree. Something else that my parents really value is financial stability and financial freedom. And that is something that they've always talked about. Save your money. My parents, they love to go to the casino and they love to go on trips and stuff like that. And I know that might not seem like financial stability if they're going to the casino, but they have the financial freedom to do so because once the bills are paid, once the mortgage is paid, once there's food on the table, they have a little extra play money. That's where that financial freedom comes from. So my parents definitely pushed my sister and I to earn high paying jobs so that way we can have financial stability, financial freedom. And I feel like this bodes well for a lot of Filipino families about the importance of education and also having a really good job that has some shelf life that can grant you that financial stability and financial freedom.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense that a lot of Filipino families, want their kids to pursue education and higher education at that, because I've met adults who have I've spoken to, and they've said, I only have like a 6th grade education, or like I don't really know how to read, or I don't really think my English is too good. So they're kind of ashamed of it. And there's nothing to be ashamed about it because we're all always learning.
Yeah.
But I can see how that is definitely a value for Filipino families to put onto their kids.
Yes. I want to kind of bring it back to that idea that Filipino-Americans don't have Filipino values. They only have American ones. American, quote unquote, value could be because yes, I also value financial freedom and financial stability, but something that I also really, really value is that I value happiness in a career over having a high paying job. Because the way I see it, if I'm going to dedicate 40 plus hours of my life every single day to a job Monday to Friday, it might as well be a career that I truly love, I adore, I am happy with. And that is something for me that I feel is a value. And maybe that's the American part. Instead of making my parents happy and doing what they wanted me to do because they wanted me to be an engineer or a nurse and
typical shit.
That's what they wanted me to do. And instead of making my Filipino parents happy, I went against the grain. I went against them. I followed my own path and I followed my own dreams. So maybe the American quote unquote value that maybe some of these Filipinos are referring to is that Filipino-Americans have the choice to follow their dreams. And if that's the case, fuck it. I'm glad to have that value because I'm glad that I didn't follow what my parents wanted.
Yeah, and it's definitely a privilege to be able to say, hey, I value happiness in my career, in my life. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not always financially stable at times. But, the value of happiness and being fulfilled brings a lot more wealth in some ways than money can.
Yeah. You know what? You brought up, being privileged to follow your own dreams. I think that's also something maybe a lot of Filipino Americans should think about and remember their own privilege. I'm not gonna speak for all Filipino Americans, but I feel like there's probably a lot of us that are able to live at home. They have parents paying for their rent, paying for their food, everything like that. And when you're out in the real world and you have a job and you can focus on your dreams because you have family, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whatever, that's paying for your rent, paying for your bills, you do have that luxury and that privilege to follow your own dreams because you're not forced to get 10 jobs to make ends meet. You're not forced to pick a job that has a high paying salary to pay for rent and a house and a mortgage or whatever. It just makes me wonder, are Filipinos in the motherland able to follow their own dreams? In my head, I like to think so, but maybe the Filipino value of keeping your parents happy is so super ingrained into their everyday that it just, they have no choice but to not follow their dreams. Like they have to go for what their parents want.
Yeah, for sure. And I love seeing Filipino Americans have their own businesses, whether it be like jewelry or clothes or food. Like it's so cool to see and know that Filipino Americans have gone against what they're expected to, or what generations have expected other Filipino Americans to do, and you see the joy, you see like the community come together and cop their items and, root for them. And that's really, really cool to see.
In a sense, Filipino Americans, when they get to follow their own dreams and go against their parents' wishes, they're breaking generational curses. They're breaking a toxic cycle that because you're blood, because you're family, you have to keep your parents happy. You have to do what they say. And I think that's, in my opinion, a little bit toxic. And because I've gone against the grain and get to do what I want to do, when I have children of my own, I know that I'm going to accept whatever dreams they have. If they want to become a stripper, okay, girl or guy, like, let's do it. Like, but you better be the best stripper ever.
You better make it count.
Gotta make it count. Have the cute outfits. I want to see 200%, you know, put into every single night you go out there and strip.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. No shame in the sex works. But, you know, if you also think about it, right, if there's so much push and forcing, there's going to be a time where eventually you can't force anymore. And people are going to go the opposite way and decide what they want to do for themselves. So I think we're kind of at that point right now where Filipino-Americans are like, no, mom and dad, no family, I'm going to do this. And I think I see more so that the families are kind of turning away from the old school mentality and embracing that each individual, each of the young people and their families are like doing something really cool. And it's also enjoyable. Like, for example, if someone's a really good dancer, the family can go watch that individual dance and see the impact that they have on the crowd, on the fellow dancers. Like, you could see how much, like, really cool things that they're doing to impact other people. And that, to me, that's also an invaluable thing to share and be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely.
For my family, what they valued was family. Like, exactly that. You know, the family's a tribe, and you respect and honor and love your tribe. You know, you value each individual from the oldest, so like the Lola, the Lolo, to the youngest. And as a sign of respect, whenever one of us kids would enter the home, we'd always bless. So, you know, bless, you know.
You're older than me, so I should be blessing you. Sorry, ate.
Ew, stop it. You know, so we'd always bless as a sign of respect. And, you know, for example, my older siblings, we were taught at a young age to respect our older siblings, older cousins, and say ate or kuya. I would feel weird if I was to call my older cousin by their first name, because to me that's just a no-no. And that is, you know, a Filipino value that was taught to us Filipino-American kids. So, you know, they also got to understand when people say, no, your values are American. Like, I'm sorry, there's no American value that says bless your elders. There's no American value that says call your older siblings or cousins ate or kuya. That just does not exist. So I need people to acknowledge that these are derived from our Filipino immigrant families who have shared with their children how to respect and how to value them.
Respecting your elders is it's a Filipino value for sure. And yeah, same thing. I remember I had this high school friend named Sarah, and I was meeting her parents for the first time, and I was just like, oh, like, what do I call your mom? Should I call them like Mr. and Mrs. Guard, whatever? And they're like, no, like, you could call her Julie. And I almost threw up in her face because I was like, what? You want me to what? Sarah, you want me to call your mother by her first name? No, it was Mrs. And, you know, speaking of respecting elders, I'm talking to my niece. My niece is 26. She has a daughter who's about 18 months now. And I was talking to her about her opinion on respecting elders. And this is something that I very much admire and respect about my niece when she was talking to me about it. So the way she views it is she will not make her daughter hug or kiss elders if she is uncomfortable. Growing up, I felt the same way. Like, there's some days where, yes, I would love to hug my auntie or my uncle, but there's some days where I just don't want to, and being forced of like, that's your auntie or that's your ninang, go like hug her, like, that's so uncomfortable. It just, like, it doesn't really teach good bodily autonomy. It just doesn't feel good. It feels like icky.
I think what's interesting is I think we kind of see that in different ways, because I've seen you leave a room without saying bye to people. So do, what is it, the Irish goodbye?
Oh yeah.
You know, but for me growing up, not that I was forced, but I didn't feel right leaving a room without acknowledging, hey everyone, I'm heading out, whether that be saying it or actually going up and giving hugs.
Yeah.
And you know, I completely understand about setting boundaries and not letting the kid be forced to give hugs. I don't think I necessarily felt forced to give hugs, but I think the part where I did feel uncomfortable with is when people would show up at parties or get-togethers and, you know, family would introduce somebody, some random person I don't recall, and they'd say, oh, hey, this is so and so, you know, oh, hi, I used to change your diapers, you know, and it's like, well, what do you want me to say, like, thanks for cleaning my butt, you know, like that's just awkward to me. And you know, it's just such an intimate thing to clean someone up. So I'm like, I don't know, do you expect me to give you a hug or give thanks? Like, I just don't know what kind of what is expected in those moments of interaction.
Yeah, I think just more so just keeping a nice line of respect, like, oh, cool, that, you know, thanks. That's it. Because no, same. I'll go to family parties and my mom will be like, oh, this is your ninang, whatever. I'm like, I got another one? I got another ninang. Damn. All these people wipe my butt growing up, you know, and I don't know these people. But back to my niece and her daughter, maybe that could be the American value, quote unquote, that Filipinos in the Philippines are talking about, that, you know, us breaking these generational traumas or healing generational traumas and breaking these cycles. Maybe that's an American value, because if you don't give a hug or a kiss to your elders, that's a sign of disrespect. You're going against everything that many Filipinos know growing up. But it's also like, yeah, if a kid doesn't want to, like if they feel uncomfortable, just because you're an elder, just because you're blood related, doesn't mean that they are obligated to give you a hug or a kiss. So like, I will never feel offended if my niece's daughter does not want to give me a hug or does not even want to be held. Like, okay, that's okay.
Exactly. And I think it's also a plus to be mindful as an adult, to give the kid boundaries, you know? So for me, if I don't, say your niece, right? If anything, I would love to give her a hug. You know, she's so cute. But, you know, if she's doesn't want to give me a hug, maybe I'll be like, oh, high five, you know, and most likely she will give me a high five. It's not forced. It's just another gesture, like connection, but not like overstepping a boundary that you want the kid to have. And not making a big deal and guilt tripping, like, oh, but I'm your auntie. You don't want to give me a hug. Like, bitch. Like, I don't care.
I don't care.
Exactly.
So I think it's really cool that my niece is, you know, setting those boundaries, letting, you know, her daughter learn about boundaries as well, and even consent as well. So I
that's
think
so important.
I think that's really, really cool, and I'm going to do the same with my future children as well. So okay, so the next comment that we got that we want to address is that Filipino-Americans are obsessed with wanting to reconnect with their culture. I think Filipino-Americans are, quote unquote, obsessed with wanting to connect with their heritage and their culture, because they want to. And I think it's also like a necessity. I think it's really important, and it's part of identity. I think identity is really important here in the US, and I just think in general identity is important, like who you are. It's definitely no secret that a lot of Filipino Americans, they grow up super disconnected to the culture because their parents want them to assimilate. They don't want them to have an accent. If their first language is Tagalog or Ilocano or whatever it is, they kind of want them to blend in seamlessly into America.
There's like a fine line of needing to assimilate and then completely just cutting off your own culture. You know, like there's balance in it. There's a need for both. You know, obviously there's a need to learn the language, a need to learn certain habits and kind of like ways of life out in America compared to the Philippines, you know, but there has to have room for both to exist together in order for the individual to live in America, especially because, you know, being a minority, someone of a cultural ethnic background in America, it just adds more spice to the you know, the people around you, things you can learn and experience. And I think, you know, being in the Philippines and seeing a lot of people around you look the same, act the same, talk the same, do the same things, you know, it's hard to imagine a place that exists where everybody around you can be a different background. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to reconnecting with the culture for Filipino Americans specifically, when you know you're Filipino, I think there's a need, and it's almost a privilege to reconnect with your culture and learn more about your Filipino culture, and even deeper than that, like where your lineage is, where your ancestors are from. Let's kind of pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about the African American community. Because of slavery, because their ancestors were literally stolen from their own lands and ripped away from their family members and ripped away from where they were from, there's a lot of African Americans here in the US who unfortunately don't know where their ancestors are from. They don't know if they're from Nigeria, Ghana, wherever. They really don't know that.
Yeah.
And a lot of Filipino Americans fortunately do know where their family came from, where their parents immigrated from. I was born in Tarlac, and that's where my family is from, and I'm very happy to know that, and I would love to learn more. And so I think reconnecting and connecting to our Filipino culture, I think it's just necessary, and we have that privilege, so we should go for it. There was a girl that I was talking to online, and she was saying that I think she's either third or fourth generation Filipino American, but her parents and her grandparents never made it a thing to teach her about her Filipino culture. Yeah, they would eat some Filipino foods here and there, but they didn't speak the language. They didn't really talk about Filipino things. They didn't go to Filipino festival and whatnot. And now that this girl is older, she craves that Filipino culture. She wants to learn more, but unfortunately, she also does not know where her ancestors are from. She doesn't know what part of the Philippines her family is from at all. So she has to figure out other ways to connect, since she can't say, oh, like, you know, my family is from Leyte and all this stuff.
I wonder how it was when she was growing up, because you know, when you're a kid, you have like family tree assignments or the history of your family assignments. I wonder what kind of questions she asked her parents and grandma or grandparents, like, hey, where are we from? Was it, oh, we're just from the Philippines? Or maybe like you said, they didn't even know because maybe their parents didn't even share with them, since they have been in America for 2-3 generations.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that's very plausible.
It's really sad because she's already detached from her Filipino-ness, and, you know, likely without the elders knowing, she's not gonna know unless you do maybe like a ancestry.com test or whatever. But even those things are like a asterisk, you know. You don't know how accurate or how you can pinpoint where exactly you're from, or even like if there was a name change of the family, a last name, you know, you can't really find that connection. So without the connection to the Philippines, the people, the culture, language, food, Filipino Americans here will likely have an kind of an identity crisis in the next maybe 10 to 20 years, where they don't even know, like this woman, like this girl, where they're from. And that would be really, really sad, you know. And because on the outside, we're brown, our features are Filipino, our features are not white, but internally, you would be the coconut. You'd be the white meat, you know. And what kind of identity crisis would that really be for people down the line, where it's like, man, I really don't know who I am, you know. And I don't want that to be happening for Filipino Americans. If Filipino Americans want to be obsessed with connecting to their culture, then by all means, be obsessed. If we're not obsessed, we're never going to know ourselves, and we're just going to stop knowing about ourselves. So I think that's where Filipinos in the Philippines, and whoever argues with us and doesn't agree that we should be obsessed, you know, this is a way of preserving ourselves here in America, you know. So like I said before in previous episodes, when our elders pass away, the ones who have taught us the language, the customs, the values, the cooking of our food, when they pass away, the only ones left to preserve that culture is us. You know, so whenever we have kids, whether they're full-blooded Filipino or, you know, mixed ethnicities, it's our responsibility to teach them. You know, so I think there should be some understanding from the Filipinos back home and know that this is truly important to us. And we're not just here just making up stories to be connected to a fantasy. This is real life.
Yes. It reminds me of this similar comment that we got saying that maybe Filipino-Americans are trying too hard to be Filipino. And I think that's interesting because when it comes to reconnecting with your culture, I don't think there's a wrong or right way. Depending on where you are in the US, there's different resources or maybe even lack thereof resources for you to connect. Being from California and living in the Bay Area or even Southern California, there's so many Filipinos and there's so many different Filipino communities to be a part of. There's so many Filipino food festivals. There was a Philippine Independence Day festival that we attended. There's parades. There's so many Filipino things to do and see and eat. And we're very lucky. So when it comes to reconnecting with our culture here in California, in a way it's easy because we get to hang out with other Filipinos and be part of these huge celebrations. But if we were Filipinos in, say, Kansas, where there's a very low a percentage of Filipinos, that even cooking sinigang, cooking adobo can be hard because you can't find a sinigang packet. I think when it comes to reconnecting, I don't think you can try too hard. If there's effort being made, it's effort and it's important. And different people are going to find different ways to figure out how to connect, whether that's through food, which is like, I want to say the easiest gateway almost into reconnecting with the culture. It could be watching a Tagalog movie for the very first time. They have Tagalog movies on Netflix, so that's easily accessible. And things like that. Maybe even listening to great podcasts like Cracking the Coconut, as a way to like reconnect with the culture. So I don't think you can ever try too hard to connect.
In speaking of trying too hard, I remember I wrote this comment, I think it was on Instagram or TikTok, in regards to the graduation stole incident. And I was saying how, I really love how Filipinos who wear the stole proudly have the confidence enough to wear it, because back in the day, if I wore the stole, like I've never worn any Filipino stole or like decorated my graduation hat with a Filipino flag or anything like that, because I would feel like a fraud. So if that, to me, that would be trying too hard, but it's so inauthentic. But I just never could do that or even feel safe in a space where they celebrated Filipino-ness, because I wasn't there yet. Yeah. So if I tried too hard in that moment, I could understand the comment. Yeah. But in terms of like us kind of regaining our Filipino-ness and embracing it and learning about it, to me, that's not trying hard at all. Yeah. That's just simply learning. Yeah. And learning from each other, learning from people who have been here for a while to share their own experiences as Filipinos in America.
Absolutely. Question for you. Yeah. Like when you said that if you say you wore a Filipino stole during your college graduation or decorated your cap with the Filipino sun, maybe a lumpia, whatever, and you said that you would feel like a fraud and that was trying too hard because you weren't very connected with your culture yet at that time, do you think somewhere deep down inside of you, something told you, hey, wear that Filipino stole? And maybe it wouldn't be trying too hard, or you wouldn't be a fraud, because there had to be a reason or something in the back of your head, back of your mind telling you, no, wear it. Decorate your cap.
I honestly never had any interest or want to decorate it or wear a stole, because I honestly didn't feel anything to be proud of to be Filipino. Okay. Not that I was shameful of it, but it's just I wasn't connected enough to my Filipino-ness. Even though I grew up with my Filipino family, there was nothing about me that said wear the Filipino flag, wear the sun and the stars, and represent that so for everybody to see. Because it's like, why would I wear that for everybody to see if I don't even feel close to it or connected to it? So that's why I truly would have felt like a fraud. Yeah, that makes sense. And my family wasn't the ones to be like Filipino pictures and flags everywhere around the house. We weren't like that, unless it was like a Manny Pacquiao shirt with a Filipino flag on it, which is problematic if you want to go there and say it's illegal to wear the Filipino flag on your body. But yeah.
My dad has a whole ass Filipino flag jacket that he wears specifically for Pacquiao fights.
And he has the frame with the boxing gloves.
He does. It's signed.
Obsessed.
But you know what? Speaking, I kind of want to piggyback on what you were saying about not feeling connected to the Filipino culture when you were in college. Bitch, same here. I knew I was Filipino. I actually took like Asian American like film studies and all these courses when I was in college as like a film major, but I wasn't very connected to my Filipino culture. And get this, I went to Cal State Fullerton, and if you don't know, Cal State Fullerton is the host of the Friendship Games, and they have one of the biggest PASA clubs, which is the huge Filipino club. They have a bunch of different chapters and sectors at a whole bunch of different California universities, and Friendship Games is this huge day essentially of picnic games and all the PASA clubs getting together, all
the different universities, colleges come together,
all these Filipino-Americans coming together and just celebrating being Filipino and hanging out and probably hooking up. And you know, and I think if I could go back and relive my college days, I think I would have liked to join PASA, do friendship games and everything like that. But when I was in college, I wasn't that connected to my Filipino culture. So I missed out on that. I honestly wasn't very interested. And I honestly was kind of like not disgusted. I don't know what the word is. I just felt
turned
like
off, turned away.
Turned off, because I was like, why do I want to hang out with just Filipinos? In high school, my friend group was very diverse. There was me, Filipino, Mexican, Nigerian, Chinese. My friend group was super diverse. And so when I went to college, I was like, why should I hang out with only Filipinos? I could hang out with a bunch of other ethnicities too, and get to immerse myself in all these different cultures that are here on this campus. So I was a little turned off, but now it's different. It's been hella years since I've been in college, and you know, reconnecting to my Filipino culture is like one of my favorite things that I get to do.
I think that's also something that's important. It's like, you weren't ready at the time. I wasn't ready at the time. And yes, we might have missed out on opportunities, but I don't think it was completely a missed opportunity because we weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think discovering your identity and Filipino-ness does take you to be prepared for it. Yeah. You know, and it's just like learning. You can't force a book onto someone if they don't want to read it. Yeah. But now that you're ready to discover that and be a part of the community and know that you're accepted and other people want to connect as well, it makes it your journey, you know. And it's cool. I like it now. I might be older, but I like it, you know. Another topic that came up on the comments section was Filipinos calling Filipino-Americans half-breeds.
Sorry.
And it was really shitty because Filipinos were literally in human zoos back in the early 1900s. The half-breeds, first thing that comes to mind is, this isn't Blade, this isn't Twilight. So a thought that came to my head was that maybe some Filipinos don't actually really have a strong cultural connection. So they find ways to connect together, and through that connection, they are able and want to spew negative comments and energy towards Fil-Ams as a way to feel connected to each other. You know, but the thing is, Filipino-Americans, they come together to connect, to celebrate, discover, share, experience culturally what Filipino is here in America. So does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. It kind of reminds me of like those cousins or those titas who don't really hang out, and at parties the only time they're hanging out is when they're in that second living room or over in the den just gossiping and comparing each other's kids and everything like that. Like they have nothing in common except for their common love of gossiping.
Yes, exactly. You know, whereas you see, like Carla mentioned earlier, when you go to festivals, even when you go to restaurants, you see Filipinos come together in union. And to me, that's a really cool space of gathering together. And that's Filipino-American culture to me.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love how you brought up the whole festival thing, because I think that's so cool, and I think that's just so beautiful to see all these Filipino Americans coming together in this one space, sharing food, or, you know, all the vendors. I think that's like another beautiful thing. It's not just performances and dancing and, you know, hanging out with one another and drinking, but it's even the vendors getting to go around and meeting fellow Filipino Americans who have small businesses. And I think that's just so cool. And I think this kind of resonates more in our last topic of why Filipino Americans are so obsessed with representation. But here in the US specifically, we like saying, oh, this is a Filipino-owned company, or this is a Mexican-owned company, or this is a Black-owned company. I think we're very into that because we like supporting these small business owners, these people of color. And so when I see another Filipino American out there making cool hoodies, or you know, making jewelry or whatever it may be, like, I want to support that. I want to give you my business. That just reminds me. Okay, so do you think it's okay to ask for a discount from a fellow Filipino business owner? Say you're at a flea market, or say you're at one of these festivals and you come across someone who has a small business, a table, and they're Filipino. Do you think it's okay to ask for a discount? Like, hey, we're Filipino, give me a discount.
I don't think that it's always okay to do that, especially because I know how hard it is when you're at a festival and there's vendor fees, there's travel fees, you're there at 6 o'clock in the morning setting up. It's a lot that goes on, you know, aside from you just looking at their display and their items. So I personally don't ask for a discount. I will give you what your asking price is. If it's at the end of the day and they're like, hey, you know, you could buy 2 for 1, and they offer that, then fine. You know, but I don't think it's right to ask, because there's no Filipino brother sister discount.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's no hookup.
I feel the same way. I definitely agree. I think if the business owner were to say you guys are chopping it up and there's a connection there, and the business owner at the end is just like, you know what, like, here's a sticker for free, or here's a pin for free, here's a keychain for free. I think that's really cool. But if you truly want to support these small businesses, you'll just pay for it. It's kind of like with your friends. Like, if your friends are starting a brand new business, and it takes a lot of it takes a lot to start a business. Sometimes you have to spend a little to make a little bit, and everything like that. And so I think it's almost insulting to ask, like, oh yeah, we're Filipino, you're Filipino, I'm Filipino, give me that discount. Like, no, if you truly want to support Filipino-owned businesses, you will pay for it and support them in that way. And if you can't afford it, which I understand, like, you know, life's a struggle sometimes, then, like, sometimes it's just word of mouth, telling other people, like, hey, like, you know, this place, they sell really awesome jackets or whatever it may be. I think there's too much of that, where people expect, you know, and they're forceful about the discount, especially like older people. They're like, oh, they're Filipino, like, come on, you're Filipino. You know, I'm just like, no, like, you know, just stop it. It just shows me that you're not really mindful of supporting this fellow Filipino. You just want the plug. You know, sometimes the plug ain't worth asking. All right, Carla, let's hop into human zoos, because human zoos were really a thing in the early 1900s. I'm sure most of you have learned about the World's Fair. And the World's Fair was initially created so that it showcased all the achievements of the different nations around the world. It started off with a well-known guy named Oda Benga. He was from the Congo. And they put him on display at the Bronx Zoo in New York, where, you know, white people, observers, can look at him in this exhibit, like a zoo. And it was like, come through, see this indigenous African man on display, you know, this savage. And, you know,
Africans weren't the only ones. There was actually Filipinos as well who were in these human zoos for display. In 1904, the Igorots, from the Philippines, they were also displayed in America. They were displayed in the St. Louis World Fair for people to see and kind of ridicule and like be wowed as if they were animals. And I think that's one thing that's pretty crazy, because obviously if somebody's different from you and you've never seen it before, there's intrigue, there's interest, there's wonder. But this way was so inhumane. And it's like, it's so insane to think that almost like a little over 100 years ago that this human zoo in the World's Fair existed.
That's deep shit. That's a part of history that they also don't teach about in US history. For those that don't know, a lot of, at least for us growing up, when we take US history classes in high school, and maybe even a little bit in college, a lot of our textbooks are super watered down. They don't give you the full truth. Growing up and learning about the history of the US, Filipinos and our contributions to the evolvement of the US is dwindled down to like a sentence, if that, maybe just a word or two about, oh yeah, and the Filipinos were there too, doing this or that. And so a lot of our US history we have to learn after the fact, or after we get out of school and we're learning. So I didn't learn about human zoos and how Filipinos were in these human zoos until way after I even graduated college. And it's just insulting, because with the original commenter saying that Filipino-Americans are half-breeds, like, you call us half-breeds and this shit happened.
Yeah, this shit literally happened. And I'm like, if you look at these pictures, I have my phone here right now. This picture of this group of individuals, they look like some young men, possibly in their mid-20s, 30s. So they're pictured here in their Igorot wear, where it's only covering like their bottom half of their bodies, and you could see people around them observing them. There's even this picture of this little girl here who, it actually looks like she's tied to this like wooden pole, so she can't run away. And she looks so sad. She looks like, she kind of reminds you of your niece, like this little girl who's attached to the wooden pole. She's in Coney Island, New York, and they're just looking at her, and she's on display like a live animal in an exhibit. And it's so heartbreaking, and this is the first time I've learned it in my ethnic studies classes at SF State, but I've never seen pictures like this, where Filipinos were actually part of the human zoo exhibits.
It's just a really, really sad part of history, but it's history and it's true. And, this is something that should be talked about, because when Filipinos in the Philippines, when they say some ignorant shit, it's some of the comments end up being kind of like humorous almost, because I'm just like, I don't know what you're talking about. But like the whole half-breed thing, that is like one that really, really grinded my gears because of just like that history and everything. And I think that person who said it probably didn't know this happened, because I feel like if you knew this history, like, you wouldn't say that shit, because that's like ignorant as fuck.
Yeah, like this type of treatment is beyond horrible. And I think this also makes a mark for people to understand, hey, we could learn a little more, we could research history a little more and be a little more informed before we make comments. And not gonna lie, we might make stupid comments, or not stupid comments, but ignorant comments to where we could have researched more. But I think you just gotta open up the understanding instead of just being a little too firm. And even if we don't want to open up a history book or read or try to search for the information, I think we can do a better job at communicating with each other to understand each other's side. And like I've said before, I'm tired of hearing all the fighting comments that we have in our TikToks, because it's not connecting us. We're just arguing and saying, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. But each side has validation, but we have to understand where each other's side lies and why we might see each other as wrong.
There's definitely some people in the comments that they're worth talking to.
Yeah.
Because they come, they speak their mind in such a way that it doesn't come from a place of anger. It feels like it's coming from a place of hurt, of course.
Yeah.
But it's when they're talking or like, you know, putting in their comments, they're being kind about the way they use their words. They say like, well, this is the reason why many mainland Filipinos feel like this towards Filipino-Americans because ... instead of saying something ignorant like Filipinos are half-breeds, blah 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 there. And I don't want to listen to that, because you're coming in with fist up, and it's coming in very angry, and anything I say to you, it's not gonna go through. You know, it's like I'm talking to a fucking piece of pandesal. So another comment that we want to address is that why is representation important for Filipino Americans, and is representation also important for Filipinos in the Philippines? But I honestly feel like, yeah, it is important. I think it's necessary for representation, especially for people of color. We live in a society where white people or Eurocentric features are put on a pedestal.
Supreme.
They're supreme. They're put on a pedestal. You know, and it's whether it's casting only actors and actresses who have Eurocentric beauty, who have that Eurocentric beauty standard in TV shows, in movies, or whatever. Or it could even be in a workplace where instead of promoting the person of color, they end up promoting the white person, but that white person may not have the experience or the skill set that that person of color may have. So representation is just so important, because when you're growing up, specifically like in the US, when you're growing up and you're watching TV shows, watching movies, even reading fan fictions, for all you fangirls and fanboys out there, and all you see is white, and you don't see anyone that looks like you, there's something like a psychological key or gear turning of like, why am I it just,
like, that's not me.
Yeah, that's not me.
Like for example, The Little Mermaid just came out.
Yes.
My niece, she's like a quarter, 3/4 black. She's mixed.
Yeah.
And she has some black in her. And the new Little Mermaid is Halle Bailey, who did an amazing job, by the way.
Yes.
We've been singing Little Mermaid songs all weekend.
Yes.
You know, and she got the doll from one of her aunties. And you know, obviously she's still young, but down the line when she's a little older, I'm going to ask her like, hey, you know, when you watch Little Mermaid, because she's seen the cartoon and the new live action one, you know, I'm going to ask her questions of like, how did you feel seeing someone like you on TV? You know, and growing up, our Barbies, our dolls were only white.
Yeah.
So there was no brown dolls like us. So I think even that is just so important to experience and see yourself and be impacted. Luckily, in this day and age, we see more representation on TV, you know, and in media, and I think it's really cool. And whether people or whether companies and organizations want to do that because they see it as a money grab, or they see it because they truly feel representation matters, you know, I'm about it.
Yeah, when you don't have representation, accurate representation, because we all come in different shades and backgrounds and everything. Sometimes there's a little bit that can trigger some self-esteem issues. Growing up, when I would always buy 17 magazine, Bop magazine, all like Teen Vogue, and for the most part, 90% of the time, the models on the cover or within modeling these cute clothes or whatever, they're always going to be white models, and that becomes the standard. And so people of color think, okay, well, that's what I need to look like to be pretty. I remember there was an interview that I read with Shay Mitchell. If you don't know who Shay Mitchell is, she's hot. She's amazing. I love her. Hi, Shay, if you're watching. Anyways, she played Emily on Pretty Little Liars. She's an actress. She's gorgeous. She's a mom.
She's a creator of Bays.
She's Filipino-Canadian, and she said that growing up, she did not like her brown skin at all. because where she lived, she was surrounded by a lot of white people. She had a lot of white friends. And because of the Eurocentric standards of beauty, she wanted to dye her hair blonde. I think she did dye her hair blonde when she was younger. She wanted to not be so tan, so she can fit in, because there was those self-esteem issues there. And I think that bodes true for a lot of Filipino Americans growing up. When you don't see yourself, then how are you supposed to feel confident in yourself? And not just in TVs and movie shows, but that's also career. Filipino parents can physically see Filipino success in those industries. They can see Filipinos become successful in nursing, in engineering. So it's almost like a done deal. Like, okay, you can become a nurse.
Like, they don't want their kids to try harder than they need to, maybe, because they already see the success. So it's like, you know what, you can succeed here. Whereas these other avenues like entertainment, artistry, whatever, they don't see success, or they're gonna think there's more struggle before you can lead to success, if any.
Exactly. Yes. I work in entertainment. You work in entertainment. I have a personal TikTok page where I just talk about working in the music industry. I give a lot of advice, and a lot of my advice is geared towards women of color, because as a woman of color myself, I've experienced some things, and I have a lot of insight that I want to share. And my favorite comments are from fellow Filipinos, like young Filipino girls, who tell me that they feel like they can succeed working in the music industry because they see me doing it. And that fucking warms my heart so much. And that's just representation right there. If you go on my TikTok page, my little bio, I have the Philippine flag there to show other people that I'm Filipino. I'm succeeding in my career field, and you can too. It's a very male, white dominated space, but I've been able to find success in it, and you can too. That's representation, because representation tells other people that you can succeed in this space where you might be a minority. It tells you that you are welcome in this space. And I think that's why representation is so important for Filipino Americans.
Speaking of representation, our very first episode, our pilot episode of the podcast, we talked about Barkada in Washington, D.C., about the wine bar that was created by 4 white guys who are not Filipino in descent, no family. And they decided to name Barkada because of their 4 friends.
Yeah.
Yet, when they started this wine bar, there was no representation of Filipinos, no decor, no food, not even wine or alcohol, until it was brought to the attention of Filipino Americans. And there was a difference in opinion with Filipinos and Filipino Americans and Filipinos across the world, saying, okay, this sucks. This is not us. Why are you taking a word that comes from our culture, our language? And yes, I know it's a Spanish derived word, but Barkada is used in the Filipino community and culture, nowadays. And there was the other side that was like, oh my gosh, yes, Barkada, keep the name. Yes, thank you for seeing us. But the thing is, they weren't even seeing us.
Yeah.
I think there comes a point where a lot of Filipinos are okay with the simple acknowledgements with just a word. But to me, if you're really gonna embrace Filipino culture, embrace it fully. Really showcase us in the best light possible. We are not limited to just a word. We are food, we are community, we are culture, we are customs. And Barkada, the wine bar, didn't have that. So I think Filipinos back home in the Philippines also need to understand that just because someone acknowledges you in a minimal way, don't limit it to just that minimal way. Want more for yourselves, want more for your people, want more for Filipino representation around the world, because we're more than that. And for those who want to know, even to this day, the Barkada wine bar, they have lumpia on their menu. They have, what do they have? Adobo peanuts. So kind of like the adobo garlic peanuts that you buy at 99 Ranch Market, those snacks. But other than that, there's nothing Filipino about it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know them, but I think they kind of just put that on their menu because of the feedback and the backlash that they had. Well, here's a little Filipino something, and that goes back to the minimum representation.
Yeah. Representation is important to Filipino Americans, but I wonder if representation is just as important to Filipinos in the Philippines. And I asked this because a couple of years ago, remember that film Gluta that came out?
Yeah.
So if you don't know, there's this Filipino film called Gluta, and it was supposed to be a beautiful story. It sounds very empowering. It's about an Aita girl who wants to be a beauty pageant queen. You know, she's going against the grain because she doesn't fit those Eurocentric standards of beauty. She has darker skin. She has curly, thicker hair, and it should have been a nice story until the director said it was okay to do brown face. So they hired an actress who has fair skin, and then they just put really dark brown makeup on her, put this shitty wig on her, and called it a day. And it makes me wonder if that was something that really bothered Filipinos back home in the Philippines. Why couldn't they just hire an actress who was of Aita descent, or someone who didn't have fair skin and had better accurate representation? Because to me, as a Filipino American, that tells me, oh, I'm not good enough to be in this huge movie. You know, they had to hire the light-skinned actress and just paint her to look like me. That's what it comes across to me as a Filipino American. So I wonder if that's also, if representation is just as important to Filipinos in the Philippines, or maybe it's not. That actually segues into our next topic, because another comment that we've gotten, and not just on ours but on other creators, and this is something that I've seen a lot, is that Filipinos in the Philippines hate being misrepresented. And I get it. We're just talking about representation and how representation is also very important to Filipino Americans. And when you brought up Barkada, you know, it was that 50-50 divide. You know, a lot of Filipino Americans were saying, no, like, dude, this is cultural appropriation. When Filipinos in the Philippines say that they hate being misrepresented, that wasn't, you were being misrepresented by these white guys, but then turn around and love someone like Tagalog Kurt, who's a white guy. Yeah. It makes no sense.
They only think they can be misrepresented by Filipino Americans, which is wild.
That is so weird.
I'm not gonna like push you all in a group, but that's what it comes out as.
Yeah.
As the only ones who could do wrong in representing is people like us.
I think the reason, this is a theory, I don't think Filipino Americans are purposely trying to misrepresent Filipinos in the Philippines at all. But I think the reason why it may come off as that is because many Filipino Americans don't refer to themselves as Filipino Americans. We just call ourselves Filipino. So if you see a content creator on TikTok or YouTube, or maybe read a magazine or whatever, they're not saying, oh, this is what my Filipino American family does, or day in the life of a Filipino American nurse. They just say, day in the life of a Filipino family. This is my Filipino family. These are some funny Filipino things. Yes, they could be inherently Filipino American things specifically, but we just don't call ourselves Filipino Americans. We just say we're Filipino. But I think that's where it is. That's just that miscommunication.
I think there's like divide because Filipinos in the Philippines really want to find a way to connect to Filipino Americans. And I don't know if it's because, you know, they want to come here, you know, because in many Filipino families, the dream is to really come to America and start a life. And I understand that. You know, like, who wouldn't want the opportunity to, you know, be in a better financial space, to be able to learn and experience the things here in America that we're blessed to have. But I think there becomes that envy. There's a space where there's envy, but there's also wanting to connect. But because maybe there's like a language barrier, an ocean barrier, there's just so many things that are like in place where we can't, that's not allowing us to truly get along with each other and connect with each other. But, you know, I don't think that should exist. Like, I know there's Filipino Americans who go to the Philippines all the time to, you know, to help the communities out there, to learn more about the communities out there, their culture, and embrace each other. But I don't know why. I think that Filipinos back in the Philippines, if they don't like how Filipino-Americans are moving here and there's something that they think we can do different or maybe inform us, there's a way to communicate with us so that we can move forward instead of just constantly arguing with each other, fighting with each other. Because like we said earlier in the episode, if we don't have that connection to the homeland, our identities here in America are just going to fade away. Yeah. And I'm not white American. I'm Filipino American, and I want to hold on to that culture as long as I can and share that with the next generations. Yeah. So it's a responsibility on both ends. Like I've also said before, for Filipino Americans, Filipinos everywhere around the world, to connect back with the homeland so we can preserve ourselves. Yeah. And I don't want us to fade away. So if you don't want us to fade away, then let's get along, because this ain't cute, and there's more work to be done. It's going to be hard, but we need to kind of just listen to each other and understand each other. Because if not, bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye. But yeah, I think that wraps it up, Jazz.
Yeah, I think so. It's a lot to cover there. But meet us in the TikTok comments, the IG comments, and let us know your thoughts. Send us a message, because like we say, we always like hearing your point of views and, try and find ways so we can all connect better together.
Exactly. So follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Cracking the Coconut. We're also on Twitter and TikTok at Cracking the Coco. TikTok is poppin'. It is crazy in the comments, but this discourse is super fucking important. If we're going to bridge the gap, conversation has to happen. But don't be mean. Don't be fucking rude. Don't call us half-breeds. Oh, we also have a website.
Yes, we also have our website, crackingthecoconut.com.
And that is it. We'll catch you at the next episode.